Just getting sorted out here and about to begin.
Very good. I can hear you loud and clear.
We can hear you loud and clear. You sounding like your energy is back. So that's excellent to hear. And we're just adjusting volumes in the room too. Yeah, because even my own voice sounds kind of loud. Well, it's because it's empty. Yeah, that's probably part of it today. That could be on our advocacy point is sound panels in this room to absorb. Yes, I think that is the long-term need for this. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Seeing no other movement in the room, we will commence with our meeting. Our meeting is unique in that it's nearly like a brainstorm meeting, but we do record all meetings of council, so just know that we are recorded and that we have, of course, Mayor Hansen online, and we'll speak in our first name basis, I believe, given that we're in the brainstorming mode for our advocacy discussions. So the agenda that will be adopted is quite simple. I'll read it out, and one of us can be the mover of it. So this is an adoption of agenda for the special meeting of council for March 13th, 2025, motion 3640325. And it's moved by one of us as councillor that the agenda for the special meeting of council of March 13th, 2025 be adopted as presented, and it was presented to us as a consideration regarding advocacy. So that is our brainstorming and our discussion. Does someone want to? Thanks, Councillor Rilling, and then we'll switch to name basis. So all those in favor? And Megan? In favor, thank you. All, and that is anonymous, sorry, not anonymous.
Just texted, he's because of Beck's birthday, he has family, so. Yeah,
okay.
He did tell Megan, so.
Okay, thanks. So now we're in first name basis, switching mode. So the idea is that we've questioned advocacy points always, and that we wanted to say, are we needing to realign them, or do we need to reset them completely, or some variation in between? Betty will jump in here as well to clarify what she sees from the CAO and administration perspective, and say how can we approach this too.
Certainly, I'll be happy to write on the flip chart items as they're identified. I'd also like to let council know that if you identify items that are general areas consideration, staff would be quite happy to look at them. Administration would look at them in terms of how they could be specifically, I guess, actioned in terms of specific asks and in what direction. So we would await your general direction on that.
And in this meeting, to be clear, as I understand it, we won't be making any motions. The intent, at least at this point, is not to make a motion that we're throwing this off the table and we're putting something else on the table. We're trying to get a sense of where we should or maybe explore, and then, as Betty said, admin can give us some sense of what they can do to support it, or what the the challenges are.
Yes, if I may, yes, I would encourage that if there was a motion, it would be identified in that these are X number of areas, or we would like the administration to look at them and respond back in terms of but how they would work as advocacy items.
Yeah, so. Not to the point of officially taking them on, though, at this point. Okay, maybe one suggestion I have then is maybe we can go to the existing advocacy points and just say, is there something about them that we think needs to change? I think we've had some rumblings around that, or to remove, and then we go to some new areas. And then there's an email here, two areas of consideration that staff gave Betty before the meeting. So one of the first, let's just hit the big word, health. I kind of turn to Teresa to maybe start us off, and Megan, if you jump in a moment, and we can hear what the both of you have a sense of movement on.
Thank you. Do you want me to go first, Megan? Is that okay?
Yes, please. I think we mostly have the same thought.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
Okay. Well, the healthcare in Sylvan Lake, like the desired outcome was that the Sylvan Lake Advanced Ambulatory Care Service should be adequately staffed to provide residents with daily service from 7:30 a.m. to 10 p.m. And basically what's happened there is we have had few or no closures, which was one of the biggest issues that we felt we needed to address. And through many meetings and as well with the influx of docs that have come to Sylvan Lake, we have seen little or no closures. I mean, there's been a few here and there, maybe 3 since July. And that was basically because someone was sick and when they got up in the morning, they couldn't go, you know, and to cover that was virtually impossible. But so that's really turned around, and we've, you know, advocated for that to the ministers and to the premier, and we have seen really exciting things happen in that area. As well, there's one of the concerns was a doctor shortage in the community, and currently we have no more room for doctors. We need another building. You know, if you build it, they will come, but we have no building. We have no actual place that they can, that new docs can come. So there might be one in one of the clinics, but we, it would be definitely squeezing that person in. So physician recruitment and retention, our healthcare attraction and retention. No, I always get the words mixed up. H-A-R-T. It's healthcare attraction and retention team. We've changed it a couple of times, so I always get it mixed up. Anyway, we have really seen some great successes. In fact, our last meeting, is this what you want me to do? Am I saying too much?
No.
No?
Because then that will give us the insight of saying, are we keeping an item?
Yes.
Are we needing
Well,
to
that's what I
adjust it? We
wondered.
need that insight.
Yeah, even this last meeting on Monday, we had 2 of the docs' wives join us. And that was so interesting. They were so thrilled. Both of them want to help wherever they can as far as connection with the doctor's offices, as well as helping with anybody new coming. So that's, I mean, to me, that's a really positive outcome of what we've seen happen. And population growth, I mean, again, that goes back to the fact that we don't really have enough room. But the other outcome was increased funding for the AHS Central Zone. We have seen no increase. Although it's been talked about, we've been at many meetings where it has been talked about, people know about it, but the Central Zone actually per capita gets less than all the other areas in Alberta. And it's a substantial amount. Okay, so now these are kind of new ideas. And when, I forget the minister's name now, Megan, you would know his name. We met with him at AACS. And
It wasn't the minister, it was the, forget his role, but the administrator.
Right. From the minister's office, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And even he said, I'm thinking you need more rather than less. You know, because our concern is that they were going to cut our hours. But he definitely was in favor of that. And so to us, and Megan and I talked about this, what we would love to see is how can we go from the AACS to an urgent care? You know, I know it's the ambulance bay, but what about space? What about what that would take? And so really, if administration would be able to find out what it would take to bring us to that level, like all the steps, and even, I mean, that would need to be asked probably of the province as well, because with all the changes in healthcare, what does that mean? You know, everything's so kind of up in the air. And recently, in the last budget announcement, there were some urgent cares announced. And some, I believe, were from a lower level to urgent care. So it'd be great to know who that was, what steps were taken, and why they got it and we didn't. So those are another ones. And so how do we get on that list? You know, like, how can we be noticed that, I mean, it's obvious by our population growth, by the surrounding area. I mean, it's not just Sylvan Lake. It's surrounding area as well. So so to us, we really feel like healthcare can't be taken off the advocacy list, if that would be okay, just because we can't, when Dr. Mulholland came to our meeting, he said to us, don't take your foot off the gas. Because you take your foot off the gas, and all of a sudden, you know, we can disappear. And we don't want that, as far as advocating for a bigger space. And with the population growth that's happening, all the subdivisions, everything else, that is a need. It's not just a dream. Anything to add, Megan?
No, that was a great summary. I agree. I think the current goal has, for the most part, been met, so it makes sense to change. And I think that goal is exactly what he already stated to us, is that, you know, we had over 20,000 people through the facility last year. That facility needs an expansion in hours and additional services is what I think the ask is.
Okay, thank you. I was actually wondering if we were going to think about a fine tuning towards how do we retool our ambulatory care. And so that question in my mind is actually answered by this little bit of a broader discussion of, do we advance to a different model, which would be like retooling, giving us more advanced care. And I've always made the argument that, we know that Red Deer Hospital is still our stop back for all of us in this whole region of some 400,000 or 500,000 people of central Alberta. But in order to keep it in a healthy way, you have to have some services outside of it. So everything that's invested in the Stettlers, the Innisfails, the Sylvan Lakes, et cetera, they support Red Deer as well. And when we need it, it's not overrun. So I like this thinking of what you're just saying. And yeah, Graham, you were...
It's also 5 years before the hospital's done, so it's going to be chaos for the next 5 years anyway. So we need services here, or expanded services.
So I should pull that up? Yes, please.
Yeah. Yeah. So a remodeling of, an expansion of, I think is kind of what I'm hearing. You also mentioned the idea of currently we have, call it no room for another doctor. We know our population's going to grow, another grand or two in the next very few years. And usually that matches that ratio of another doctor, often, one doctor per, you know, 1,700 people. I've seen ratios like that. Does the community, could we use more doctors in the sense of to address that family doctor need? Is that what we're hearing? Go ahead,
I'd
Megan.
love to jump in on that one. We asked that question the other day, and actually we could use a substantial amount of more doctors with the service region that we carry. The number's closer to about 1,000 patients per panel to be ideal. Some clinics carry way more. One of the things that was expressed to us, though, is that these doctors have chosen rural because they have specialized skill sets and they still want time to practice those skill sets. And if they have a 1,700 patient panel, all they can do is see those patients. They can't do any of that additional work that really keeps them here for the long term. So we could use quite a few more family doctors. What I will say is us changing our municipal advocacy goal will not change the work of the Heart Committee. They are still about attraction. They're still about retention. They are still about making connections when it comes to new office space, and that work will continue. I don't know that we need to make that our municipal priority, because that committee, that's already their priority, and they're really tied together in many ways, but that work will continue. It's just municipally, what do we want to ask for?
How about the role we have as councillors on that committee? Would we keep our foot in their door at the same time in the Heart Committee as well?
I would think so. Especially, well, when we looked at other communities, their model typically has some elected official representation, but I'll tell you, it's a really big deal when you bring someone in from out of town, and to have a councillor or to have that official municipal representation that is their tour guide and they're welcoming to the community, I think has been really beneficial for us.
Gotcha, yeah. Teresa?
And I know Megan's not going to say this, but really the thing that I've heard over and over, and that's from people from the College of Physicians that I've spoken to, and that is if the mayor's involved, people pay attention because it's a big deal when not only does she do the tours, but also in advocacy. Because, I mean, the original, you know, I mean, we've just seen so much movement, and a big part of it is because the mayor's face is on the picture, you know, and that's a big deal when it comes to advocacy with the provincial government.
Yeah, that makes sense, yeah, because it's very symbolic that the whole community is interested in the idea. Go ahead. Yeah.
Just a quick question. How many doctors are looking at retiring in the next 10 years?
That's a really good question. We've certainly heard of at least 2, maybe 3, right,
Yeah.
Megan?
I would actually say our biggest risk is retirements is some of that. They need space to bring on new docs. But the other side of it is any international doctors sign a 5-year commitment to us. So that is another date to be really conscious of, is that many of them have come from big centers. And if we don't really make this home for them, it's quite common to see quite a bit of movement around that 5th year to go to a larger center to practice their skills.
What's the number of doctors we have currently? Was it over a dozen now, or is it about a dozen?
I have 16 in my head, Teresa,
Okay.
is that correct?
That was my number 2.
At our meeting the other day, it was thrown out that 24 is probably our target. But I will say, one of the clinics in town does have an eye for expansion, and I think there's some possibilities that might happen with or without us there.
Okay, Shireen, you had another question too? Oh, okay. Graham, you have another? So I think we can jump to another topic then, or do we have, by focusing on the urgent care, then we've captured the biggest shift? Okay.
If I may?
Yes.
Just to clarify, like the one other way we support the committee is with staff support. So I'm assuming that with the councillor committee, we're
good
also
point.
recommitting in that area.
Okay, so just to make sure you heard, Megan, just the idea of staff supporting the Heart Committee as well, still, ongoing support.
Yeah, that's very helpful.
Okay, another advocacy point would be the high school. I would turn to Jazz, but I'll instead turn to Megan to give us the
We would
latest
have no
sense.
recommended changes there. This is the one out of the three that I just, we got to keep our foot on the gas on this one, and I don't foresee a change until it's done.
Sure, Shireen?
How do we get better results from this one? It's something that we really, obviously, dire straits need here in the next 10 years. You know, how do we shift what we're doing to get the results that we need from this?
I think it's getting closer to that shovel ready over the next year. We have to be a bit, I think that's probably the reason why this year. One is a lot of it went to the big cities, but I think this next year we need to do some of that work that we already have planned out to just get us closer.
Any other conversations that need to happen with new, like I know we've identified the, you know, the basic wheels of finance decisions in the province, but anybody else identified in any conversations that you've been in?
I think also similar to an election, there will be, well, I'm certain that there's quite a bit of turnover on both school boards this next year. So we're going to have to do some work, whoever is around the table after the election, bringing those new trustees up to scope. Also making sure that we've got those relationships with RDP is one that I think is really important to work on. When they invite us, we should be there, and we have been this last year. And potentially through some old college conversations, just with that collegiate model, but those and just be the squeaky wheel is the other part of it. Every time we see our MLA or Minister of Education, we need to continuously bring it up. And Jazz and Sean were able to go up to Edmonton on Tuesday. And it sounds like they had some great conversations. I'm looking forward to an update from council on that. But.
One thing I was thinking about in terms of the names that you just put out there, RDP is certainly, and many community colleges, post-secondaries are in a bit of a financial crunch in the next few years, likely, certainly next year. RDP is looking at a $10 million deficit. So it's very hard for those colleges to expand and to really say, we're going to take on a new program. So it would, I think we'll need to be advocating with them too. I think you're right. Keep that stream of interest going and not let it die out and say, oh yeah, we were talking about that 3 years ago. That's right. Yeah.
So that's why I think we need to keep it as top advocacy as well. We cannot, like Megan said, don't take our foot off the gas. Because if we do, then we'll just disappear. And I think it doesn't matter who we talk to, it needs to be said. You know, we need a high school. We need an urgent care. You know what I mean? Like, I just think it's so important that we don't, because we are desperate, but so are a lot of other communities.
Yes.
So if we don't keep talking, they won't hear.
Yeah, that's a good point. Graham?
Well, and it's such an important one that it's one that needs advocacy because it can disappear if you don't. And there are other topics that are important to town, but they aren't going to disappear because they aren't ones that will disappear. They're front and center, and we're so close. And I think really what happened with us this year was just the whole last 16 months of influx of people. It was just overwhelming in the cities, and I don't defend the government all that much, but they got run over too, and they have priorities, and I think we're that close, and I think we're that important that we have to keep it going, and the relationship with, I think we ran it, was it up at Alberta Munis, and we ran into the Olds guy, and somebody was just expounding the virtues of our partnership with the Olds College. I can't remember where it was, but it was, yeah.
Megan?
And I guess I'll just want to say, when we set our advocacy goals, I think at the time we said these could be 5 to 10-year goals. These are, and obviously that need snuck up on some of these sooner than later. I feel very hopeful that next year this item can come off the list, but it's, you know, these aren't meant to be things that we tick off necessarily within 6 months of asking. So I think it's pretty reasonable, the progress we've made. It'll look great with a tick mark beside it next month.
Okay, thanks.
Ian? So, I guess going back to Shireen's question, is there anything that, I don't know, administration could research for us to throw a new ball in the air? I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. Does that make sense?
To help support this. One thought, I'll throw in one thought maybe, and Betty, if you can jump in too, is like the school boards themselves, they have a network of people too that maybe we need to go through them as well, their administration, to say, so the schools that really did get chosen this round, what were critical factors that they had that we maybe didn't? So maybe that's part of what you're asking too.
Yeah, yeah. Does that make sense, Betty?
Yeah, and so basically trying to get a better idea of what the criteria is.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
and
success.
why them and not us?
Success factors.
Yeah. And I love what Megan said about, I mean, if you want to get to, I mean, if you want to be on a team, you gotta buy the jersey, right? And so, like, RDP's doing something, we need to be there. If Olds College is doing something, I mean, maybe we need to go to their graduations. I mean, we go to RDP's, but maybe we need to go to, you know, find out what's some way to meet the president, or so that they see us and we see them. And I think sometimes it's those extra steps that, oh yeah, I remember Sylvan Lake. You know, they're in their conversations or they're in their meetings and it's like, oh yeah, I met that. You know, I met the mayor and she said, you know, but they don't know unless we tell them.
I just had another thought to add to that is we have our partners that we get together informally through the summertime at the Gulls games. Maybe we want to think about our advocacy points and say, are there some critical teams we want to bring into conversation in a nice casual way? Yeah, yeah. So there's another thought to chew on. Another random thought, this isn't so much the high school advocacy, but with the increased partnerships with these colleges, we've often talked about the colleges, the Polytechnic now, and their economic impact on our town. And having training in Sylvan Lake and or training that supports our economy. So, you know, obviously we have lots of retail, service industry, tourism, we have light industry, oil and gas. They already have some natural links to us, but if we can ever improve them through these conversations, that will help yet another part, another aspect of our town. Because it would be kind of neat to have a training facility here in town that could tie in with their needs to train and our need for trainees.
Yes.
Anything else on the school advocacy? No? Okay.
If I may, one of the things I think we were looking at last time was whether there was extra consideration for like leveraging provincial dollars through the investment of municipal dollars in the project. And of course there is a budget allocation. However, it's not framed up. I'm just wondering if council has an interest in basically making that I guess, particularly if we're looking at being successful within the short term, that basically taking that to the next level in terms of identifying what that would look like. And,
Yeah, how to leverage
yes,
projects with it.
yes.
Yeah. I'm kind of where I see some nodding of heads, yes. Megan, did you catch that point? And does that make
I did
sense?
that. That sounds great.
Okay. I'm just writing that down myself.
And I'll just note that I think it's so great that we're taking the time to talk about this. We probably should be having a bit more of the strategic conversation a little bit more regularly around our goals, just to make sure they're always up to date. So I appreciate we're doing that. Wish I was there in the room, or at least had my camera on, but still, great.
Yeah.
We're just glad you're here.
Yes. Glad you came back from the edge. Next, Betty's just writing down something, and I'm still writing down something, and then we'll jump into our next focus. Our third, I'm just going blank for a second. Yeah, health, schooling, and tourism, yes. That was brought up recently that we likely need to think differently. And without Tim here, I'll turn first to Megan again, because you work jointly with him the most on that project.
Yeah, I think this is one we have to readjust on. The current goal has been very clearly stated that it's not something the province is interested in. I'll say I think there's kind of two directions we can go, but this is one we probably need to refer back to administration for some of this. But I think one way is, so we were working with the 5 communities, Banff, Jasper, Canmore, Drumheller, and us. When you look at other provinces that have been successful, they work with a larger group of communities, and there definitely is that interest around Alberta that maybe we need to increase that number and diversify the committees. So including in like a Cold Lake and a Hinton and a Crow's Nest Pass, and making it so it's a larger community ask, so it's more relevant across the province. And there certainly is some interest there. We've been invited to kind of some startup conversations around that. So I think that's an option. But the other one that I guess I want to plant the seed on is that within Travel Alberta, we are, Shireen, you might remember the name because it's just escaped me, but we are not categorized in a category that I think is ideal for us. We likely want to be, I think we're an emerging destination right now. We likely want to see ourselves in the breakthrough. They have a definition of a number of things you have to do to get to that next category. And maybe the goal is that, or the advocacy goal is that Travel Alberta recognizes us as this breakthrough destination. Now, we also had some great conversations with Terry when he was here, and what we kind of heard was, unless we have a 5-star hotel, there isn't a lot of opportunity for us to move up on that list. So then maybe the advocacy goal is that we need to work with the province to attract some sort of a center that would get us closer to this goal. So I don't really know what the answer is on this one, but those are kind of 3 different ways we could potentially go.
Go ahead, Shireen.
Yeah, so I agree with you completely, Megan. And it was really interesting listening to Travel Alberta and Tourism Alberta talking about where the dollars are going to go, and that the designations are going to be on like a lot of Alberta-owned land. So how do we shift or use what's around our lake for that purpose? I think that's really important for us to look at, because there is a lot of money there and they want to sink a lot of money into it, as long as it's tied into something that the province owns on the land, which the waterside lands is half the province. So how do we play that up?
Could you clarify that idea of the Alberta lands? Like, how does that
Yeah, it's a grant, I made some notes about it, but it's some grant money that would happen for entrepreneurs to come in, and they get grant money for developing on, Alberta-owned land, like,
Okay.
so, anything that's like
It's the province's all-season resort strategy.
thank you. Yeah.
Between the two of us, we'll get all the words right here.
Yeah, well, it's all new ideas, so yeah.
It's a lot of money. And entrepreneurs are doing we just to show them what's available, because a lot of people don't know. Sorry.
But the Alberta lands?
Yeah.
What Alberta lands are there?
Well, half the waterside land is owned by the province. If you split right through the building.
Although
If
we
you-
own
if you-
it
if
now,
you
don't
take-
we?
Yeah, if you take the waterside land building and you cut it in half, the north side of it is the Alberta province land still. It's not owned by the town.
I thought we did own it, but I thought they had a condition on it, that 99-year condition, that it has to be recreation-based.
I believe the setback from a lake would prohibit any development in that, on that portion anyway. But, you know, in terms of, we could look at that, but I think
Yeah,
that would be
find out.
what you would find.
Yeah.
I'm missing this, where at?
The waterside lands.
Oh, the water, okay,
Yeah.
I know, that's the LLC.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, yeah, okay,
The split personality land. You're dealing with.
because there isn't very much around the lake.
No.
Other than the Cub camp or whatever it was.
I love that.
Scout land. So so the two ideas that I hear in that are the idea of broadening the advocacy group, working within the group of 5 to promote that thinking. And the other one is to look at how do we get to what's known as the breakthrough destination status, which would raise us to a higher, call it grant level. And then tied into that are grants for projects like the all-season tourism initiative. Is that how I'm hearing it? Just kind of 2 main ideas with a third one that promotes it at the same time. What's the appetite for the group of 5 to become a group of 10 or 12? Or what's your sense, Megan, from the conversations you've had? Or have there been any specific conversations about it?
It's so early days. I think the strategy probably makes sense, but we really haven't pursued that in any way that's meaningful at this point.
Okay.
It only started on the table for discussion at MLC last week, so.
On which committee?
At the Municipal Leaders Caucus that Graham and Teresa and I and Sean went to last week.
Okay.
So a very new idea that has not been explored.
Okay. And Teresa, want to jump in?
So it's my understanding, right, Megan, that nobody has really taken the lead in this.
I would say that's correct. There's at times where different municipalities have, but that hard no from the minister really did kind of sink us all down and go, oh, well, when he says it that clearly, how successful will we be? Now, the larger community conversation, what I can say is that the intention isn't that we're going to make some movement on the next year. It would really be to get prepped so that in 2 years from now, we would have the background, we'd be ready to have that conversation. So I mean, I don't think we should shut the door on any conversation on it. Are we going to be going hard at this one, you know, every time we have an opportunity for a conversation in the short term? Maybe not, but maybe we can start to work with those other communities just in a light matter to prep ourselves, because it takes some time to get all that together.
Shireen?
Okay, this is very out of the box thinking, and I'm sorry ahead of time. But what about the idea of advocating to the province of Alberta to allow the town of Sylvan Lake to almost like a Banff, like charge at the door? Because we can't, because we're not a provincial park. But what about the idea of allowing us to do that and asking the province if they'll allow us to do that? And changing changing the rule in that way. Maybe we don't want money, we just want a rule to change so that we are allowed to charge at the door, essentially. And as somebody who owns a business that depends on tourism, I can see goods and bads of that, because we can take that money and we can invest it into concerts or events for the community and really ramp up tourism so that people are willing to pay. And I have thought about this so long doing that people would pay an annual pass and they know ahead of time every event that's happening in Sylvan Lake. You get to go to Culinart, you get to go to this concert that's happening this weekend, you get to go to Jazz at the Lake, which is going to be revived, I've decided. And all of these things, no, seriously.
Yeah, that
Can
makes
we
sense.
switch, is anybody interested in that advocacy or having that conversation?
Never thought of it.
I know, but it could be great.
Even just to tie in with, our first reactions to it, I see lots of stumbling blocks to getting that ability to pay at the gate, as using that expression. But I think it should be explored, these idea of like the seasonal pass. Like you said, this pass allows you to have all these different events, and I could see that being one that we could control more, and having a potential for success that, hundreds of people might say, yeah, we're going to do those events, and they might not be, from all the way from another country, but we know our tourism base is this province, and they have the ability to come often because of their distance. So this idea ties in, yeah.
Yeah, I think the first thing we'd have to do is talk to the province, because certainly I remember those negotiations and actually acquiring that, and it was certainly a condition at the time, or an expectation at the time, that it would be for public park use only. So so it would be, I think, a change from what the original agreement was.
Yeah, but the pass idea to events could be independent of that question. That'd be our own thinking.
It's come up before.
Yep.
Yep.
Go ahead, Megan.
I was just going to suggest that as a part of the initial tourism-based community conversation, one of grants was, of course, the dream goal out of it. But the other thing that we talked about was just having additional revenue opportunities, and that something like that falls in line with it, or some additional powers for that. One of the other conversations we've also had was, should there be a bed tax? An additional that is on hotels, but also short-term rentals, and as a way to have visitors pay for those additional costs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That came up at, Sean, and was it the mayor of Cochrane, or was it who was sitting at our table?
Hinton.
Okay. And, but there was the bed tax, and it would have to be, for substantial, it would have to be short-term rentals. Anything that has a bed was subject to a bed tax. So, I mean, hotel tax here wouldn't generate much, but we have significant other accommodations. So that came up, and I was going to bring that one up, because the whole idea is to get extra money to fund what we need to fund.
Shireen?
Yeah, thank you. Airbnb, that would be easy to achieve for sure. I think at first it might hinder our hotels, maybe a little bit, but not that much. So yeah, I love that idea. A follow-up to that would be that the provincial government just started taking a tourism levy of 4% from Airbnbs. And I want to know where that money's going, and how can we dip into that pool? Where's that money going? I guess that's my big question, because there has to be, if that money's going somewhere, what are they using it for? Can we ask for some of it?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They're pulling it from our community. If you see it, I believe they implemented it in October or September 2024.
I remember us talking about it, yeah. When I think about the main core, I'll call it the core 2 points we were making earlier on the conversation, I lean strongly to that one of the working hard, like when we think of advocacy of tourism still, the focus would shift to the breakthrough destination status, and the second core would be broadening the 5 communities, working with the existing 5 to say, can we expand to more and keep the long-term conversation going for tourism grants, tourism resort status. That's my initial gut feeling about call it the core idea of what we're advocating for. But breakthrough status, breakthrough destination ties in with all these other ideas we're talking about now. And maybe there's a third one about, call it this revenue stream, whether it's the event passes or it's the accommodation tax. Where is that money going? All of those capture maybe a third area.
So if I may, so what I would understand from that then is that if this is an objective, an advocacy focus, some of the strategies might not be advocacy. They might be something quite different.
Mm-hmm. Any thoughts on that, Tim? See head nodding. Ben? Yeah, so it might be action items that we take on as opposed to advocacy with other
Another
orders of government. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So we're talking half strategy here, half solution, half advocacy. Yeah. But that's okay. That puts it in context of what we're really shooting for. And revenue was a big purpose of becoming a resort town. So no shock it's coming up in our conversation now. Yeah, Shireen?
Thank you. I think my takeaway from everything that I've heard from all the tourism conversations that I've been present to is that the Alberta government isn't going to pay for it, but there are a lot of streams through Tourism Alberta, so that has to be our focus, is getting money through Tourism Alberta. I can't see the Alberta government giving us money for this, and I just don't, I think it's a waste of focus. So yeah, definitely a rebrand on what we're doing and who we're asking to get some results, because I can't see the province doing that, especially with how much money Tourism Alberta has for us.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Teresa?
And I think what you said there, Megan, about we need to, in the next year or even two, really setting that up is really the advocacy part of it. The other is the action or the steps that we want to take or a result of, whereas the advocacy part is really in the next, and maybe it, now I'm stepping out of the box, but maybe this, I know it's really important and it's a really high priority to us as tourism, but if in the next year or two we want to kind of set ourselves up to create this place and space to be seen by Tourism Alberta, yes, maybe there can be someone on council who is still involved in that, but really working hard with somebody, administration or whatever, to set up that front or that, putting that team together for in the next 2 years that's really going to be able to come with power. Because I think that's part of it is that's why I asked if anybody's taken a role of leadership in this, is somebody has to own it. And somebody has to take the time and have the place and meet with those other communities, set it up, make sure that, yes, are we on stream? Is that where we want to go? But does that mean it should be a top priority, one of our 3 advocacy items right now? I'm just asking the question. I'm not saying we shouldn't, and definitely we need to talk about it. But I just think maybe it's not there. Maybe we're in the working out stage of it. Just a thought.
Good question. Yeah. Yeah. Anybody want to jump on reflections there?
I've got an extra one. I think it should still remain. But when it comes to who needs to lead it, we need to lead what we need for our community. And we need to choose, what our dream scenario would look like. And then if we want to bring others along for the ride, once we've decided that, I think there's power in numbers. But we've never really been clear about what do we want. Yeah. And that's, I think, whether it's a change in status to breakthrough, whether it's a bed tax, whether it's a gate, I don't know. But we need to kind of lead our own charge here and then ask the others, hey, does this align with anyone else? There's power in numbers there. But we've got to get our own ass straight.
In that process of getting our own vision, you're saying, Megan, that you think it should stay on the advocacy level still?
I do, because no matter what, I think there's an ask to another organization or another arm of government. That's what's going to come out of that. But I also think that although this one could take 10 years, the reward could be so great for us in the long term that it really is aspirational for us. And I think we should still continually be having that conversation. We are a community who supports substantially more people than live here. And there needs to be some sort of assistance with that. We just haven't really narrowed down what that is. And I think we've had some great options to explore here, but.
No, good comment. Okay, Betty, do you have enough from our conversation that you sense that there is one or two things you can chase after? You mentioned one, which was, the status of lands and things like that. That was at least one or two of them.
Yes, I made a note of that. And certainly staff could, I am taking notes, so
Yeah.
some of these things we might be able to get some more clarity on. I think this is one of the ones, and if you want staff to take a shot at it in terms of, you'd have to really try to figure out that advocacy part, and define what that looks like, because no, I'm not clear right now what that looks like for sure.
Yeah.
So.
One thought foggy, we're the thick fog. One thought I had is this, when I started to narrow in on this breakthrough destination, if we become that, then to me, whatever we vision our ask is later, we are more powerful in it. If we can raise our profile, we become a greater voice. That's one thought I had. So I'm thinking about that breakthrough destination quite a bit, as in if we can get to that point, we'll not be seen as the hillbillies by the lake. We'll suddenly be a serious game. Yeah. Shireen, you had a thought too.
Yeah, for sure. One of the big things that Terry said was that unfortunately we're not by an airport. So I think partnering with Red Deer Regional Airport and ramping that up somehow would help us elevate our status as well. Because he said you'll never get there because you're not by an airport. But then after I was thinking, well, we are. It's not an international airport where people come from Japan, get off the thing, are excited to do a thing in the snow and then get back on a plane. That's what he said. So interesting thought around that.
Yeah.
So I'm putting up tourism and just we need clarity on the other.
Yeah. I'll mention, as Betty's writing that down, our old advocacy, our last advocacy point that we have set aside was victim services, and I'm not suggesting to bring it back. I'm suggesting we take it off our website. I just noticed it on our website, so we could, or we could keep it there with a celebratory note so I just noted that today, actually, when I was doing a little reading beforehand.
I think it'd be great to leave it up there with a celebratory note on it, so it shows movement.
Yeah.
That and even some of the celebration of, like
health.
no closures, and that sort of thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
I like that idea, because not that we're not working on. I mean, victim services was we got it. It's working and it's awesome.
Yeah.
But I mean, obviously, there's better results than that. But yeah, I agree.
Something, if I could jump in and mention, I think I brought it home from Grand Prairie, but they had a little brochure basically. And one thing I would love to be able to really concisely tell residents, and we do have the names, but to say, here's our advocacy goals for our community. Here's maybe a success or two. Here's what we're still asking. Hey, if you ever get an opportunity to talk to someone about this, like they've really empowered through their goal. Like this little brochure they made was so clear and concise, but they've really empowered their residents too to get on board and say, yeah, we do need that. And I love that. So if we could share a little bit more rather than just the key topics of it, but what's the sentence or two that goes under that about why this would be helpful to us? Because I think when you just see on our website tourism-based communities, we want to be a tourism-based community. I'm not sure that everyone understands what that ask is. And to be fair, on that specific example, we don't either, but
And also we want to, we know that there's sometimes a tension between our mutual goal of tourism, resident focused and tourism friendly, visitor friendly. So it's important actually using that example that we're very clear about why, so that there is clarity for all of us as, you know, when we start getting into taxpayer mode instead of just, I'm a human on the beach and I love it.
Certainly, I think that's one thing staff could probably help with too, because I think it comes out low in priorities for citizens sometimes, but I don't think they necessarily understand that the pursuit of tourism actually has the potential to contribute directly to keeping residential taxes down.
Yeah.
You know, that if
measurable.
the bigger our big business element is, then the less pressure there is on the residential taxpayers. So, and I don't think that's a side of it that people necessarily realize. So.
Yeah, good, very good point too to add to it. Yeah. So we're ready to shift gears here. What I'm thinking of is a couple of things. There's two gears that we want to go forward on, and one is the conversation that comes directly out of the staff's email that Betty copied for us. And then the other gear is there something else that we as councillors want to bring forward to say they're worthy of talking about? And then I think we have to put it in neutral first before we switch into another gear, knowing my manual transmission, and that is a bathroom break. So I wouldn't mind running to the bathroom, grabbing a gulp of water. That's and I was thinking it's right on the hour, so it's kind of all perfect timing to say we're switching gears, but we'll put it in neutral for probably 3 minutes or so. Is that okay, everybody? Yep. Good, okay. thinking about the other gears we want to switch to, why don't we jump into the email? And there's two areas, I'll say, that come up in the email. One is housing as a concern, for Wellness and Community Connections talked about. And our Public Works gave us a focus on the basically water. I'll say it in the simplest sense, but they also have a transportation infrastructure program, and so they've kind of encapsulated several of their recent asks of provincial government. The one item, the second one, drought and flood protection program, that was a $7 million ask. It sounds like, we just haven't received the official letter, it sounds like we're likely not to get that grant. Is that how we're to read this? Someone probably said it over the phone, but there's no letter yet to say no. But there's an opportunity to apply again. So that's good at background information. When I was reading through the, I thought I would read very quickly the strategic plan late this afternoon to do some more, kind of call it brainstorming for myself, and these two topics came up in my mind as potentials. So I came to the infrastructure more from the point of view of infrastructure and how we protect our lake. So that, you know, this comes more from the point of what we are asking for government, which is specifically water supply. I was thinking also about, call it on the stormwater, wastewater side, specifically stormwater. How do we have infrastructure that always protects our lake? So infrastructure can be seen from many different lenses. And when we think about our storm retention ponds, I know there's plans for the long-term future that speak to infrastructure that are, when you talk about a retention pond, they can protect the water in different ways. One just holds back for a few minutes, and others hold back longer. For instance, Willow Springs, there's a report that suggests that we should build a retention pond in Willow Springs right before the creek to improve the water quality that subdivision gives to the lake. So, so that was, I'm not sure, you know, I wouldn't say that description I'm giving is an advocacy goal. It's part of a strategic plan thinking, and but it ties in with this idea that Public Works has about infrastructure dollars, period. So, and I'm not sure if that would make a good lobby effort. Yeah, but I'm just thinking it's certainly on something of priority. So any thoughts on how infrastructure can fit from either the freshwater side, the health of the lake side, and just other needs, maybe even in the town? Because one of the grants was for transportation, and that's to do with population growth and the traffic that's increasing in the Iron Gate area. Megan, did you want to jump in on any of that? We're all sort of pondering right now.
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting idea when I saw that grant list, because to me that's not necessarily an advocacy goal because they change. But I do think that it should just be a standing item, kind of, but maybe not listed like that. That council should be, I think we could play a more active role in advocacy when we apply for a grant between the time it's been applied for. And I would say you'd want to set a parameter, you know, of a dollar amount. Any grant we apply for over $500,000 or whatever that is, that we should always just know what that list is, things we're waiting for, and how do we put the pressure on specifically to, whether it's write some letters or have some conversations, and how can we be more involved in that, not necessarily picking a project for it, but just in general, when we're asking for money, how do we make sure we're following up the political angles while we've put in the application on an administrative level?
I agree. That's what I thought. I thought it is definitely something that we as council need to be kept up to speed every time it's been out there, because then when we're out in, like where we see MLAs or ministers directly, you know, we could, yeah, like just knowing that and having that specific, okay, we applied for this grant, we need it, where, you know, it's an important, and we're just wondering where it's at. You know, it's just keeping that in the forefront. I'm not sure it's an advocacy item, but it's definitely something that as council we could affect because of our, you know, we're seen by them more than maybe our administration even. But definitely, I think, I love the idea of being kept up to speed. Okay, this is what we did. Now we need, every time you're with somebody, say it.
Yeah, I like the thought. Betty, jump in.
So in terms of how staff could support that, if staff were identifying like, say, a priority grant and then provided like a kind of a briefing note for council, you can sort of have in your back pocket if an opportunity arises, or if there was an interest in a letter, that could be the basis of giving a grant application more profile.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's, yeah, I can see that around the table here. We're thinking that.
What about a section on the CAO report that listed, just a standing section, current large grants in application process and what ministry they're asked of?
That'd be a good way to communicate it as an ongoing.
And status.
Kind of like we have motions listed that for a certain length of time, the actions that need to be taken, and then they slowly fall off as they're received or enacted or, yeah.
Okay. Yes, that's easy to do. So
Yeah.
perhaps a motion at the next meeting. Next meeting would be,
Okay.
I like to get it in motion because then
Yes.
it's not going to get lost with transitions. So.
I really like that idea because then it's an ongoing process. Plus, it's easier for administration because it's just part of what is done on a regular basis. And like you say, it doesn't get lost then. I think that's a great idea, Megan.
Would someone like to put their hand up to work with Betty and Jolene to draft a motion that could be brought forward at our next meeting? And then we can, Shireen, that'd be wonderful. Pick a name and we'll know we'll get that done.
Thinking about the infrastructure specifically, and you know, even from my own angle that I was coming from in terms of protecting the lake, I see this as a conversation that we could bring up again in strategic planning too, is to say what are our priorities. Water has been sort of thrown at us by nature. Mother Nature has told us again that she's more powerful than us and reminded us again. And here we are dealing with it. So that could be a strategic plan in terms of our infrastructure, because infrastructure already is in the strategic plan. There might be something actionable or borderline advocacy that we want to do as council with staff. Shireen?
Yeah, one of my longstanding concerns rolling around in my mind is, you know, if we do stay on aquifers and we never connect to water, or we choose not to as a community, and we do have those drought years and we get into a crisis situation, but there's no water leases left, how do we, is there any way, and I don't know enough about it yet, but is there any way for us to guarantee a water lease, like, into the future? Because what if there's such a bad drought? Like, people have a right to water, but you look at some of the communities, the Indigenous communities, they don't have a right to water. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, safe
And,
water, yeah.
well, water is a very, very complex
Yeah.
issue, and certainly where your water comes from is dictates exactly how difficult it is. So I'm not quite sure what you're thinking is
Yeah.
in terms of what we would get
Sorry,
some protection on.
My specific question is, in the event of a crisis and we have a drought year that turns into we have no more aquifer water, what can we do to protect ourselves in that situation? Is there, what do we do, I guess? And is this an advocacy thing to make sure that we have a right to water? Like, I'm not saying it right, and I know that, but anybody?
I'll
Well,
add to the
thanks.
conversation too. In our strategic plan, it does say something about the obtaining a water right. I forget the wording exactly, and turning to Muggs from Graham's work. There is the talk of the Red Deer River having that extra allocation free still, like it hasn't been it's not a fully prescribed river. There's very little left in it. And I'm not sure if we have the ability, the legal ability, that I don't know about. And that maybe is the admin ask then, and the Muggs ask is, can we apply for something we're not going to use right now? But in anticipation of our growth, and you know, again, I've read the reports around this lake. There's that one that says 150,000 people in this area at some point in the future. Our own premier said 1 million people in Red Deer. You know, like that water has to come from somewhere. So we need to get for this region, we need our dibs on it too. And at some point, I wouldn't be surprised we will see the Water Commission will be like the Wastewater Commission. I mean, it already is both, but it legally is both. But we don't have a water system that's regional yet, a fresh water system, potable water to be exact. So maybe jump in, Graham, too.
For years, all I've ever heard was when we go to the river. Yeah, when we go to the river, but we've got the aquifer and we've got our wells and whatnot. So, but it'd be interesting if we can pre-order at least, make a reservation. I know that's part of the process is the new Ardley Dam, hopefully, which is going to be 10 years down the line, but it's 3 times the size of Dixon and half the area because it's so deep. So it could be interesting.
So maybe that's something. We're saying it's not the advocacy, but we're saying strategically this is and so maybe that needs to come up as a motion too. I'm wondering, Ms. Osmond, for
yes, because certainly if anything happened that we lost access to the aquifer, that would be a crisis of the proportion that the province would definitely be involved because it's way beyond what a community could handle on their own. And of course, I've heard people express, would we be looking at the lake? But in fact, we have no water treatment plant. So, so it's, that's
not possible at this point.
That's not a feasible solution to us, should anything happen either. And I don't think anybody knows if the aquifer is more or less reliable than the river at this point. I don't know if that's knowledge is even there. So especially if you're late getting on the river, I guess. So certainly this is the kind of thing where we can get you an information paper, basically, to just advise us how that works and those kinds of things. So,
yeah, Shireen?
Yeah, I guess my whole point around all of this is that maybe it's not an advocacy right now. It's just needing more information to see if it needs to be an advocacy, because there is emergency money for specifically drought for what is it like the climate caucus had emergency money for droughts, fires, things like that, and I just about wonder if that should be part of the thought process when we get the information back. Anyway, yeah, it's more getting the information now to see if it has to be an advocacy thing in the future.
So basically, do we know enough? Are we looking far enough ahead and at all eventualities?
Yeah, I think 50 years ahead.
Yes.
And that's why I don't sleep at night. But Amjad said at the seniors budget meeting that the aquifers he knew had 10 years in it. The ones we have now.
The ones we have now, but the actual aquifer is quite huge.
Exactly.
It's
it's huge.
That,
it's huge.
Yes.
But he said, and when he said that, I went,
Our license is
we'll
in
continue
it.
to look. I know.
Yes.
I know.
And yes, because my understanding is it's not like it's one big lake down there.
That's right.
It slowly flows.
Little lakes.
That's right.
So
Yeah. Sorry for taking up time. It's just now it's just timely.
It's a long-term image or vision.
Yes.
Okay.
And even when we speak of this idea of the license from the river, it is related to aquifer because Amjad was probably referring to, we have licenses in the aquifer. We just can't pump out what we want. we're allowed to, we have to get a license to do a drill a well, and then we have a license of how much water we can pull from that well. So right now, we are doing that. We're asking for a bigger license from for one of our wells. So licensing and with this motion we ask of admin in the near future can tie in with river and aquifer. It could be a question of both, is where can we license and how far in the future and what volume can we kind of reserve for this region, because it literally won't be just the town of Sylvan Lake. It will be a regional water, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
I
certainly.
have
Go ahead,
I
Megan.
have a non-water thought. Just because overall, when we initially discussed having advocacy priorities, we have always said 4 would be our max capacity. And then and victim services, I think, can officially come off, even if it stays online to show we were successful. But I think I'm at the point where it could come off for me. The other ones that I just had in my notes were, as potentials, were transportation and housing. So just want to make sure we
Yes.
chat about, is one of those another big priority, or do we still just want to stick with 3 and see what happens?
Let's switch to housing and then touch each one and then say how we could, and really to answer directly your question too, Megan, I think is that idea of how many would we have too. There's always been that magic 3, maybe 4. But yeah, let's switch to housing right now and just talk about that. And one reflection to open up that discussion I thought of even a couple months ago is housing isn't our advocacy point, yet it's nearly like one in the sense of it is such an active file for council, and because of the Housing Accelerator Fund. So we're not doing a lot of lobbying, we're not advocating, but we're very active on this file. So I was thinking about that in my own interests with regards to housing. So let's open it up. Anybody else want to jump in with thoughts about, because I have a couple other thoughts I could share while people are pondering. It looks like people are still pondering. One of them is the fact that we're doing a housing study right now. So until we get those numbers, I was thinking, as much as I'm an advocate for housing, I don't want to rush into something too quickly and say, this is what I want when I haven't been given all the data. And we do know the previous study is, we have a great sense that it's not going to be radically different from the current one that's coming out. Things have changed in the last 6 years, but not upside down. So do we strategically wait for that housing study to come through? Do we see what happens federally too? There's a couple of factors going on in the back of my mind, but we are certainly very busy on housing. And I see through the work through the Lodge Foundation and just, community contacts that housing is not going away in the minds of the residents, and they really do. I suspect some people would say, Ian, what are you talking about, delay it being an advocacy point? You should be advocating more. That would be a criticism I think I'd hear more quickly than, oh, I understand your point of view. Yeah, let's wait another half year to make it an advocacy point. I really think it's a hot one on the streets, but I'm wondering how structurally ready we are to say it. And maybe we just need more conversation. Maybe we are ready then, but I do want it to be one soon. That's my feeling. Let's go around the table a bit. Shireen, do you want to?
Yeah, what would our ask be? What would our advocacy ask be?
Yeah.
What's our ask? What's our ask?
Yeah.
Because the province has forever downloaded it on business people to say, are you going to invest in this or are you going to build this? How do you turn it into a business? I've never seen it work. I've never seen, well, then maybe that's our ask, right? Mm-hmm. To ask them to stop asking the investors to do it and say, own it.
Yeah, social housing in the true
Social
sense.
housing and vulnerable sectors,
Yeah. Go ahead, Teresa.
I think we're not, I don't know if we know the why, and I certainly don't think we know the how, because there's still so many gray lines and between provincial and federal and municipal. And I mean, the same old thing is always said, if the municipality does it, they'll be given it. And then they'll be held responsible for it. And then the other agencies will tend to take their hands off, because, well, you said you're going to do it. Yeah, and so I think, personally, I think we have to be really, like, I like the fact that we're doing a housing survey, whatever it is right now.
Housing survey, yeah.
Yeah, because if we have clear data and we can clarify a concise ask, it's like when we were doing healthcare. I mean, there's a whole lot of things that are needs, and there's a whole lot of hows, but what's the why? And so we had to really narrow it down. Okay, what is the urgency? And the urgency was the closures at AACS. And so that's what we went after. Every minister, MLA, we talked to them about it. And then, of course, we put into place other ways that we could help that. But I think we have to be careful that, I mean, it's the same old saying, right? You ask, if you don't know what you're doing, you don't do anything.
Graham?
Well, advocacy is something that if you don't do it, it goes away. This isn't going away. This is front and center. This is probably more important than most anything we're talking about right now. And it has legs of its own. It has people of its own doing all sorts of work that we don't really have an ask of what we're asking for. We're asking for whatever other community in Alberta is asking for. So everybody's asking for it. So it's not an advocacy item. It's not that it's not the most important thing, but it's one where we have administration and staff and different groups banding together to do what we can if and when a solution ever comes about.
Megan, you want to jump in? I got some thoughts too after you.
Yeah, I like how I sent the link in the chat for Grand Prairie's advocacy goals. And as I was looking at it, they actually have one that's provincial and federal funding for housing needs. And I think all of the information from our community will come out of that housing study. But I do appreciate, whether it becomes an advocacy item or not, that they're able to clearly, in a couple of points, say, why is housing important to us? So in Grand Prairie, it's the number of households earning less than 80% of the area median household. Income has grown faster than households are earning 81%. Ooh, something crazy is going on in my house. But they've got a couple key factors why it's a really big deal for their community. And I would love, whether this is a provincial, federal advocacy goal, or whether we're just talking about why do we apply for this grant, to be able to clearly state, and I think we already have this, the needs assessment will also give us some clarity on it. Just clearly state why it's a big deal in Sylvan Lake.
One thing I was thinking about that, when Teresa posed it so clearly, that the what are we asking for, really, right? What I think will evolve soon out of community, and I certainly hope it will, but I'm very hopeful that between a number of groups, partnerships between groups, there will be an ask, and not necessarily of the town directly, maybe as partner as well, because municipalities usually have to be involved, otherwise other grants don't come through, as Ms. Devlin said the other day in meeting. But I think there's going to be more than one project that's going to come forward in our town that community groups are looking for, and there's about 7 groups that are involved in housing in our community, and they're not all housing owners. Some of them are doing work in the housing sector, such as Red Deer Native Friendship Society. They help house people in our community as well. Red Deer Housing Authority is another group. They're not into the building of houses, but they run housing in our town. They actually own houses. Then there's our own Sylvan Lake Community Housing Society. There's the Alliance Church, the Catholic Church, and the Sylvan Lake Lodge. There's, I missed one. Oh, and the Lions. So there's 7 groups that I know of that are actively or very actively talking about housing. And I wouldn't be surprised that something comes out of one, and I suspect more of those groups. And we might become a key advocate for that project. So I think that might be one of the asks that we'll need at some point in time, is how do we assist our community in getting some of these projects going? And it will hopefully tie in with that housing accelerator money, and and then we can throw some grease on the axle. So, like all these things hopefully can come together. That I believe will end up becoming, whether it becomes a formal advocacy goal or a direction of council in the near future. That's my gut feeling, is that within the next roughly year, we're going to see movement, and we're going to be reacting to it. But just as long as our minds are ready, even if it's not an advocacy goal, if our minds are ready for that moment to say, yeah, no shock, we knew this was coming. Yeah. Any other thoughts about housing and advocacy, or yes, Shereen?
On the other item that Mayor Hansen brought up, it was, what was it? Transportation.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so do we see that that is something that could be a tangible item for us to advocate for? Because transportation is so important and goes hand in hand with affordable housing. A lot of people, have that issue of getting from Red Deer and back, but is that something that is reasonable to ask for from the province? Every other municipality, and is that what we're talking about when we talk about transportation, is busing, I'm guessing?
Potentially, yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah.
These are generally municipal responsibilities. It's between a community, but, unless you're talking about like a provincial bus service or something,
Yeah,
it's not
I
really.
don't think it's.
think it's really their
Yeah.
responsibility.
Yeah, with how many municipalities have to take care of it, I don't know if that's an advocacy thing. Do I want it? Yeah. Is it one of those loss leaders? Absolutely. It's a loss leader in a community. It brings people in because they have transportation. So it's one of those things that attract people to a community, for sure. Good people that work in service industries and, have lower income housing, and opens doors for them. So I don't think it's an advocacy ask, though, no. I don't.
Maybe it's, like I know often you see in communities with some transportation, they'll often get grants from other orders of government, but it's not, like you say, not necessarily run by those other orders, but often you'll get federal grants for, buying certain buses or energy efficient buses. I've seen quite a bit of that lately, but there's a lot of granting work, and that's really how as I understand it, our Zoomers bus and that works predominantly on grants, I believe. So that's something that's at risk of disappearing too, I guess. I remember picking up a hitchhiker. I know you're not supposed to pick up hitchhikers, but I think this person was more at risk than me picking them up because I'm a random stranger to them. This is years ago in Whitehorse, and I remember them saying, yeah, I don't work on certain days because we don't have busing in Whitehorse on those days. So busing is a critical thing to your economy. It's a critical thing to family incomes and their safety, so that random strangers don't have to drive them home, because that's literally who I was, driving them home. Yeah, so it's a real issue for many people about their security of income, personal security, and economic support in your own community.
I think again with transportation, it has to be a why. And if it's, like you said, something that, why would we advocate and what would we advocate for? I can't put anything around that. Maybe somebody else can. Maybe Megan has a point or something that would be a what. And maybe it's just something as simple as, but that's not advocating to the next level of government. So Yeah, I just don't know what the what would be.
I think for this one, it would be funding of other levels of government, but I'll also give my personal 2 cents. Housing hits higher for me than this does. I just wrote it down when someone else said it and wanted to make sure we didn't lose it.
Graham? Go.
Yeah, it's, we're doing all sorts of different things through FCSS and whatnot and our bus programs and whatnot. They've tried, private places, private outfits have come in and it's failed miserably. And so this is one that's a little ways down the road.
I'm thinking about the other day about how we would keep an ongoing perennial list of grants that are being requested from other orders of government. Maybe transportation randomly comes up there too, because there'll be times when WCC will be applying for grants and it'll be on that list, and we have the opportunity with the minister or something at one of our Alberta Munis events or other events. Maybe that grant list that we're talking about actually becomes like an advocacy that just changes based on what we're needing at that time in our community and what opportunities there are. So that transportation might pop up every once in a while there. So that's another thought I just had in terms of the value of that list and and then with those notes that you described, Betty, of having, here's your cheat sheet on the 30-second elevator talk notes on that grant, that if we read them, we're reminded they're on the list again, and oh, I just happened to be talking to the infrastructure minister, and boom, there I am advocating for transportation without it being the formal topic yeah, falls under that continual list.
So are you saying then, Ian, that we're going to make a motion about the grants, and should that be part of that motion then, as far as any type
Information.
of
We were,
grant, whether it's for transportation
could
or
be any department.
Do you want any grant, or is
I-
it specific
I-
to transportation?
I think we were thinking originally of any grant above a certain value, so it wouldn't be the $1,000 grants, but that, I think maybe we have to name it by dollar, or do we have to name it by important to that department? Like sometimes a $7,000 grant is, the biggest grant that department might ask for. I don't know.
I'm just concerned that if we do apply for a lot of grants, and I would be concerned that if the list is too long, like
Yeah.
it's not going to be useful. Maybe I'll give some thought to the parameters.
So maybe even before we write the motion, then we get a. Shreen, you were going to add something too? No, that's good. So yeah, we want to. So yeah, we could have a simple motion in another meeting coming up, just talking about grant list. But if we can tailor it a bit better to say what we're hoping to have on it, but it is grants of significance right now.
So yes, so that's what I'm thinking, probably something that, it might be a CAO call in terms of certainly amount would be one thing, but the other could be like impact on service levels.
Yes.
Like if it's going to have a serious impact on.
Yeah, and
a program
it
or
could
whatever.
it could even have an impact on the strategic plan, for instance.
On STRAC goals or
Yeah.
service levels.
The other motion, just to remind us all, was the water from the river idea, water licensing, I should say. Water licensing. A river or aquifer. The other one that I wrote on my own list that hasn't been mentioned yet was, I don't believe, it was coming out of the strategic plan reading and the idea of building reserves, because it's in our strategic plan. It came up a lot in our budget deliberations. But I don't think, again, it's a advocacy goal, but it maybe belongs still in that strategic plan, but I wrote it down because I was thinking, oh, that's a significant thought. But it may have impacts on our advocacy as well, just like all the other grants. But because when we get grants, our reserves are better protected, because now we're borrowing and digging into reserves more heavily when we don't get these water infrastructure, because that construction's going ahead. Come bleep or high water. Megan, anybody else around the table? Any other items that struck you in our conversations, or any topics we're missing? We'll probably all walk away with something, oh, why didn't I mention that as we're driving home? But because even when I made my rough notes from my reading from strategic plan, a lot of them, like I was writing down the words tourism, year-round events, that came up already, and diverse needs of residents, like transportation, we've brought up. Those are critical. The word infrastructure, new sources of income kind of came up too. Yeah, so most of my notes got somehow covered actually in our conversation. So I feel fairly comfortable that I'd hope.
And if your notes got covered, then I'm sure they're all covered.
Hopefully. Yeah, Megan, or Shireen, and then Megan. Shireen?
I just want to say that I really enjoyed this conversation because these are the actionable items that we can do as a counselor besides all the paperwork. So thank you for having this meeting.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah, it was great. Megan, any last thoughts or anything we should hit before we summarize?
No, this was exactly what I was hoping we could have tonight. I think we have two motions, what I hear, that we can come back and make it another regular meeting. I don't think there's any urgency to make them tonight. And then the possibility of maybe talking about housing again after that study, but I think it's great. Hopefully we can, we'll get a bit of support back from admin and they can help us make some recommendations. And I think the other part of this is once we've fine-tuned them for this next while, is that just figuring out those actionable steps under each of them is, you know, education, it's attending this or attending the RDP event, or what are those kinds of things that we can attend, converse, write a letter around to really make sure we're constantly having some activity around these.
Good point, and I can see that we've already got that natural partnership going on between yourself and one counselor on each of those items, so that's probably where that will be driven, that conversation, and then kind of and maybe other counselors can step in at different points to assist, but I'm glad we have
exactly that. But I think it's so valuable that all of us are really in the loop on this.
Yes.
Because although you do need a person or two that's kind of driving it to make sure that we're getting to those actions, and some of them we kind of ran out of railway on, so that's why we needed to redefine them. But it should be any Sylvan Lake councillor. When you walk up to any minister, you know, they should know when you're 10 feet away, oh, it's Sylvan Lake, and they're talking about a school, healthcare, this, whatever those items are, we should all be singing them.
Yeah. I'm thinking of the probably housing is going to end up on our list in the very near future. Another opportunity I referred to and we've referred a couple times to that survey. There's the Planning and Development Department is planning the Housing Summit conversation in community. That might, through planning and development, there might be some takeaways from that might drive the conversation and actually bring an advocacy goal sooner than we think. I know the Lodge is very actively doing research, the Lodge Foundation, so that might bring something to the forefront too in terms of their potential partnership and conversations they want to have with community, which is a little bit different than the housing summit that the Planning and Development Department wants to do. Because the Lodge Foundation has a bias towards senior housing and has a role in its own right to carry that conversation. So as a counselor on that, around that table, I felt kind of funny at times thinking, oh, as a counselor, I'd be arguing this point, but this board is a community board and they have a right in their own to proceed. And I didn't feel like, oh, everything should be, I gave them context, but I think, yeah, they have a conversation to make and need to make in this community and to build partnerships regardless of a housing summit coming up too. All right, I think we've come to conclusion. I look to Betty to make sure that we've covered the formal steps to make sure voice has come through from us clearly and that administration has a way to help us.
Well, we certainly will get at this right away. I do want to caution that, like, some of the information you want is not the kind of stuff that's easy to get. Like, it's probably going to need some real tracking, like finding out why communities were successful with something, for instance. Like, though that's not easy information, so it might take some while. I just want to caution council about that. And with the tourism one, of course, is the same thing. What's the focus there? So that's going to take a bit of work. But we'll get at it right away, and I'm sure we'll have some level of report back to you very quickly. So,
okay.
And then we'll have a better idea what more would take. So.
Yeah. All right.
But I just want to express that if those happen at different times, that makes sense. You know, if there's a point where this goes back to our tourism team and they've got a bit of a clear recommendation, and that one's ready to come back a bit earlier than perhaps the health one, I think we take these as they come, and we don't necessarily have to wait for all information on all items. Because if we have better information on one, it at least helps us move that one along in the meantime.
Yeah.
Yes.
And these kind of go on their own timelines too, so.
So does council want to adopt these together as priority areas, or or just identify them as priority areas now and then with probably more specific objectives later? Like, just how do you want to kind of formalize what you did tonight, or at what point you'd want to formalize it? Are you just identifying them now as, like, we definitely got 3 areas, but we don't really have like an advocacy focus, I think, at this point. So.
Yeah, go ahead, Teresa.
I think that once we have feedback on these items, like the questions we've asked and that sort of thing, then I think we can put them into clear and concise statements. That's my thinking. Mm-hmm. I don't and maybe we can do one at a time, one that it makes sense for a period, like Megan said, that we get the answers for one of them and we can put them into a clear statement. Maybe we adopt that one. I don't know. Is that reasonable?
I think it's quite reasonable.
Okay.
For sure.
And
You don't want, I understand council is already right involved in a lot of this stuff already, so there's no reason to hold anything up. Right. Because, you've got 3 areas that are essentially carryovers, I guess. And, but they might need some refinement. Yes.
And I would say on the health and tourism one, a good step might be, I'll use the health one as an example, that Teresa, you're really the leader of that project. Once we get a bit more information, maybe you could propose a draft back of what that formalized statement, and then we're not necessarily changes on the high school one, but once we get a bit more information back with a bit of a recommendation on the tourism one, then Tim could help bring back a suggested, more refined goal.
refocus. Yeah. I'm wondering too, I'll leave it to the real chair of our council, Mayor Hansen, but I'm wondering in my mind right now if committee of the whole, as each one comes back, committee of whole might be the meeting format to to address that in, because we already do our advocacy updates there anyways. If it was a whole bunch coming back, we'd probably have to set up a new meeting like this and take 2 hours to really chew it over. But if it was one item, maybe committee of the whole is the structure. But I leave that up to the real chair, as I said. Okay.
You are the chair of the committee of the whole, so.
Oh, I am the chair. Yeah, but you're the chair of the council. That's what I said earlier. Yeah. Yeah. You're the chair of the, you're the real chair. That's what I'm saying when I say the real chair. You're our mayor. So yes, I am the chair of that evening. Okay. Seeing no other heads nodding or arm raising, only people nodding off to sleep. No, nobody is. Just joking. I will say that there is no other business needing to be discussed. Therefore, we have covered the agenda and we are adjourned. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Megan, for